Hey, everybody, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Thanks for being with me today. All of January, I'm talking about investing in plant-based innovation such that this secular trend is the solution to our many issues plaguing the globe right now, such as climate change, deforestation, wildlife diversity, animal welfare, human health care costs, food security, and really so much more. So as we look towards sustainable consumption in the future, this month I'm talking all about how we're going to get there. And I say it's through plant-based innovation. So I want to bring on my guest today, who is the CEO and co-founder of the EatWell Group out of Canada, Marc Aneed. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Pleasure to be with you in the audience.
Yeah, so happy to have you here. We have a lot to discuss because I think the EatWell Group is a very interesting company in its investment strategy and how it invests up and down the supply chain for plant-based businesses. We're going to get into that in just a second, but first I'll say you and I actually have a lot in common. So you started your career at Quaker Oats. I started my career at Kellogg's, the cereal company.
Yeah.
You did your MBA at Kellogg's. I went to Northwestern undergraduate. You are a natural wellness consumer products expert. I'm a plant-based business trends expert and consumer product goods expert and plant-based. So we run in the same circles, but I've never met you before. So there's so much that I want to get into. First, tell everyone, what is the EatWell Group and what do you do?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. EatWell Group is a plant-based foods platform. We're a platform. And what that means is we look across the ecosystem or across the supply chain down through to retail. We invest in companies that are close to the farm gate all the way down through to CPG. We stood up the EatWell platform really just a number of months ago. We closed 2 of our formative deals in August. We closed another one in November. And so really the back half of 2021, I can't believe it already, was the year that we kind of birthed this platform. We are a group of seasoned executives in capital markets, in CPG, in plant-based. Some of our group were very early, 15 years ago in the space in Canada when plant-based foods wasn't even a term. Building some of the facilities close to the farm gate for processing. We're a micro cap today. We're traded on the CSE in Canada, so that's the kind of the junior exchange there. It was our way to launch the business, and we have really quite big ambitions with what we're doing with investing to growth the platform and eventually moving on to a U.S. exchange as well.
And I actually thought you were on your way to a U.S. exchange. Do I have that wrong?
We did share with the public a number of weeks ago that we hired an investment bank. So we're working with Roth Capital out of Southern California here to evaluate the options to move towards our U.S. listing. So we've definitely been public about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very exciting. But, there are many platforms. You're using the word platform, so I will too here as well. There are many platforms that say, okay, well, we just want to gobble up, for lack of a better expression, lots of CPG brands. They don't invest up and down the supply chain. And I'm curious why you're taking that strategy.
Yeah, listen, that's a really good question. I would tell you it's actually the missing link. If you look across the space, you're right. The leaders in the space have picked a piece of the supply chain or the chain. They've picked a vertical. So they might be a big CPG or commercial engine. They might be deep in R&D and food tech, and that's a multi-year investment. Or they're at the supply gate. Listen, we with our partnership group discovered years ago, if you control supply, because it's such a young business, you're going to be able to work that all the way through to down to retail, which gives you control and understanding over quality, quantity, cost, and where innovation feeds into plant-based foods. Innovation in this space doesn't actually just happen in the lab. I'm over a 20-year CPG executive. I've done this a long time. I love brands. And there's a big difference when you're cultivating, or let's stewarding a mature business where innovation really comes just at the idea stage of what the consumer wants next, versus these younger and very, very exciting spaces where innovation comes in processing, farming, seed genetics, even in the food tech angle, where we look at how do we use technologies like fermentation or extrusion to make the food that the consumer doesn't know he or she wants yet. That's what we're solving for. I would just add this. Years ago, 2 of our partnership group built Verdient, which was a processing facility which now is owned by Ingredion, which everybody in our audience is going to know Ingredion today. And that was all because we know in Canada, the majority of the world's pulses are grown, and pulses are where you get plant-based proteins. They're good for the soil, they're nitrogen fixers, good for the climate, good for you, good for me, and good for farmers. So there's a 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. But even then, this was when Beyond was a twinkle in the eye of a few folks, and everyone was amazed at $150 million valuation. Our partners were getting phone calls saying, I just got a contract at Timmy Hortons, so the Starbucks of Canada. They want my sausage for the breakfast muffins. I don't have enough yellow peas.
Right.
So early in the sort of the process for our partnership group, well over a decade ago, we recognized there's going to be one missing link, and that is if you can connect retailer, the brands, to the farm and to supply, that's where you're going to have success for the long term, and you can take care of a lot of people at the same time.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because I just want to elaborate for people. What you're talking about is if you're shifting over to plant-based consumption, for that to happen on any kind of meaningful scale, what you're really talking about is a shift of the global food supply system. And so if you have to change the entire system, so you're saying, from the farmer to even seed genetics and then through the supply chain and co-manufacturing plants. We'll talk about that in a second, what a bottleneck it is for the plant-based industry, the co-manufacturing plants, and then you can do the large-scale production of CPG. But if you don't have the rest of that system set up, you're really going nowhere. So to change consumption on a global scale, which is what we need to do for some of the issues that I discussed at the beginning of the show, deforestation, food security, climate change, animal welfare, human health, et cetera, you need more than one burger, you need more than one company. You need really a shift of the whole system.
You're exactly right. Right now, we have global supply chain clogs, and that's for businesses that are mature.
Right.
I had to take one of my kids yesterday to buy football cleats for his spring season football, and Nike and Under Armour, brands we all love, we're out of stock at the biggest sporting goods retailers. Now, they're very mature. We've been making cleats for a very, very long time at the very biggest companies with mature supply chains. If those are clogged, and you have to now imagine what a lot of folks, I think, are starting to learn is plant-based foods may as well be only a day old as a concept.
Yeah.
Even though we've been developing oats and wheat for 150, 200, 300 years, the actual foods that we have now are because of food tech. It's innovation in clean tech, clean processing, really innovative way to make the foods. So if that's only a few years old in terms of its supply chain maturity, and we're talking about the very biggest companies who are just dealing with, I don't want to say just, but they're dealing with, let's say, the boats and the rail and supply. We're actually, like you said, we're still in the first inning of building a system. That's why EatWell Group said we're going to solve the scale supply problem first. So our biggest investment was at Bell Pulses, which is a processor, and we're networked with 3,000 farmers. We know where the drought and the weather conditions might be going. We know where the soil conditions are going. We understand how the farmers are thinking about crop rotation, regenerative ag, and what is good for their livelihoods. And we also, with that, connect to academia, the seed geneticists, as I mentioned. When you solve what EatWell's solving, it's this. I want to be very clear. Historically, in plant-based foods, which is a very, very young business, downstream and upstream have not spoken to each other well. The farmers, so to speak, the processors didn't know what the brands were doing. We've solved that gap. So today, with our downstream business, which is a very exciting business we have to talk to about today, when you talk about food security, nutrition security for infants globally.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
We have our CEO of Amara Baby Foods is less than a phone call away, really, from understanding from our lead CTO, Dr. Gino Bertone. We have to talk about snacking as well, who knows what's happening in processing technology and making delicious new food, who talks to our president of Bell Pulses, because we're linked into the farm gate. We're not having to rifle through things. We understand where the supply is going. It's a really unique platform. I think the enthusiasm you'll see from me is multiplied across our team. We've got over 120 years of experience in the leadership team, and we're just getting started. So our conversation couldn't be at a better time.
Yeah, and I love what you say, because as you say that, previously the up and the down of the supply chain didn't really talk, and it wasn't really that nimble. And so now, as we restructure, if you will, the supply chain for large-scale plant-based consumption of foods, but also materials ultimately in the end, you're going to have not just a more fluid supply system, but a more nimble one. And I think there's not a whole heck of a lot that was good that came out of COVID, but there are some things, and we're all realizing how our current supply chain system isn't working, and then our system isn't working either as we look towards climate change and the rest. I'll say from our standpoint at VegTech Invest, we are defining a new investment sector altogether. We call that VegTech. So the innovation with plants and plant-based ingredients to create animal-free products for sustainable consumption. And we look at this as a global secular trend, really addressing food security. So I'm excited to talk about food security and infant security with you, because all of these things truly are linked. Maybe before we talk about infant and food security, let's talk about the three companies that you have, and then baby
Sure.
food's going to be one of them. Let's talk about the three companies that are currently invested in EatWell. What you got?
Sure. I'll give you the high level view. So Bell Pulses is our processing arm. That is a scale business that is doing approximately 60 million Canadian in revenue. It's a profitable, mature business with 4 decades of experience, run by the Gaudette brothers, who are just gems of people, and they run what we call the crown jewel, the Canadian prairies, that processes yellow peas, green peas, fava beans, chickpeas. These are the foundational pulses that you would find in a Beyond Burger at the end of the day, as well as any number of different snacking products, and as well in pet food. So Bell is an incredible business. I love it. Tom will talk about it in a moment. The Bell business is sold in 35 different countries in about a dozen different products. So we have great breadth. We have some of the biggest names of CPGs, our customers: General Mills, Colgate, Nestle, Ingredion, and it's people in pet food. So when you think about the addressable market, the running joke my team's heard from me is it's anybody with a body, including your pet. So
if you're breathing, then you're having plant-based food.
That's right. So the folks at Bell have remarkable relationships that they've developed and curated. And here's the piece I think that I'd offer you from EatWell Group, and any time you're looking at investing. We're not Johnny-come-latelys. We're not entrepreneurs who stumbled upon a new space as on an opportunistic basis. We work with people who've been working for 40 years plus in the space, and we know how to look for quality. So it's quality product, it's clean processing tech, it's good economics, because the reality today is, you said it's a secular trend because of the key levels that matter. And I'll park on this and move to the next business. The reason that the capital is coming into the space is what you said. This is a multi-sector trend, right? And people now have permission to say, you know what? I do need some more plants in my diet. Who knew we needed academia to tell us, do what your mom and dad told you, eat more fruit and veg? But you don't have to, I've been in the space forever and a day. Vegan used to be a bad word in consumer product. It's not. It's a badge of honor now. It's remarkable. Yeah. So quality and economics that matter. And so there's been more capital in this space. I think if you look several years ago, let's say 5-6 years ago, I think the totality of investment in plant-based foods may have been $100 million, $125 million. I think the second half of 2021, it was over $2 billion. The numbers keep getting bigger. So
please. I love this. So what we saw in 2020, let me just get this straight. From 2010 to 2019, $3 billion was spent in all of the plant-based sector. In 2021, at $3.1 billion. So in 1 year, more was spent than all of the decade prior. And then I don't have the number yet for this year, 2021, but I know that the first 3 quarters of 2021 beat out 2020, and 2020 beat out the prior 10 years. So
it's exponential. So that's where, listen, we used our experience to say, let's go get a real crown jewel of an asset, and we've done that, and the tailwinds are well underway. And this is a long-term trend, but we're looking at high double-digit growth, even in what might be considered traditionally an agribusiness. The second thing we did, the second leg of the stool, is food tech. Now, we particularly talk about it as a food tech angle because we're about inventing new foods. And in our investment thesis, we want R&D that we can monetize, or IP we can monetize in 12 to 18 months. Enter Sapientia, which means wisdom in Italian. And Sapientia is led by Dr. Gino Bertone, who's our Chief Technology Officer. Gino, a moment of glory for Gino is he invented the twisted Cheeto at Frito-Lay, which did over $200 million in its first
Thank you,
year.
sir.
That's probably a conservative number. And at one point, Gino said, I've made kids happy for a long time. It's time to make kids healthy. And so about 7 years, 6-7 years ago, he left Frito, worked with a bunch of alumni that were part of that expertise at Frito-Lay and extrusion and Cheetos, and developed what we now have is a plant-based Cheeto. Its first launch went out the door just a few weeks ago to Federated stores in Western Canada. It is a plant-based Cheeto. It's baked, not fried, nearly 4 times the amount of protein. It's non-GMO, vegan seasonings, and has that signature crisp and crunch of a Cheeto. And we can't make enough. So, and we're just getting started. But here's what we do with food tech. We acquired or invested in a portfolio of IP that will keep us busy for several years, founded in extrusion, which is how you make a lot of these products like the burgers that we always talk about. Well, it's also how you make snacks. If there's one trend that you would put up against plant-based foods, Elysabeth and company, it's snacking.
Snacking, absolutely.
You don't need a PhD in anthropology to look at our society. We're busier than ever, and we're tired of feeling tired. So when we need things on the go, we want things that are energizing and we feel good about for ourselves. And what Gino brings is he's one of the leading extrusion experts in North America. 24 patents to his name, several awards in the industry, both at PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, and on his own, has joined our team and leads extrusion. And we are working on people snacks, pet snacks, and baby snacks. And frankly, we just have so many ideas, we can't get it all done in a day, but we'll be busy for years.
Well, that's the thing, because we're reinventing the entire food supply system. So
right.
Everything is up for grabs. I was presenting at the Plant-Based World Expo in New York about a month ago, and the stats I was presenting from Spins was that in 2021, snacking was up almost 70%. And so you were seeing, at first you saw everyone go for the burgers. So from the retail perspective, burgers were a little bit down, but it's because plant-based chicken was up, plant-based seafood was up, and snacking was off the charts. And you were also seeing in 2021 that move from the independent natural grocer to the large, I'm speaking for the US now, for the large national chains like Wegmans and Sprouts and Whole Foods, et cetera. So you're seeing that kind of mainstream adoption as we go forth. And it's no wonder then that we have these supply chain issues that we're talking about before, because you're starting to see real numbers get behind these badge of honor products that are plant-based and vegan. And everyone's like, I'm okay with that finally. So there's this mass scale adoption I see, but I'd love to talk to you about that as well. I know you have a baby food that you're going to give me your number 3 company, but at some point I'd like to talk to you about the adoption curve too.
Yeah, we'll absolutely come back to that. So that's the food tech angle. And this is, I told you, our thesis is we invest in IP we can monetize in 12 to 18 months. This one's out the door within 6 months of closing the acquisition, because we know what to look for. We have a very close relationship with the Saskatchewan Food Center, which those of us deep in the industry will know have their fingerprints all over products like the Beyond Burgers and Oatly's and others. Yeah, they're right at the bedrock level of plant-based foods. Dan Prefontaine, the president, is actually on our advisory board. He's a very good friend of the company. And this is back to when you look for innovation. I've run innovation groups for years. It's always about the confluence of thinking and processing. It's never just about a picture on a page and an idea. So what Dan helps us with is connecting culinary trends with processing expertise and new ideas all the way from the farm gate down through with our extrusion technology. The last business we bought to finish out our chain is our baby food business. I joke with the team, when we look at investing in consumer products, we start with a category that's at the inflection point. So we're not going to acquire the 19th brand of plant-based milks. That market is saturated, and it's got all the big players, which is great for that space. But we're all about creating the next frontier. So we took a look at the infant nutrition sector. It's 90 billion to 100 billion worldwide. It's still growing at high single digits. It makes a tremendous amount of sense globally in terms of how can you get healthy foods at an appropriate price value to the consumer, to developing economies, and do it in a way that's delicious, 100% organic, 100% vegan. And that's what we have with Amara Organic Baby Food. So this is a branded business that we've invested in. We have a majority stake. Amara is led by Jessica Strusenegger, our CEO, female-founded, female-led, absolutely incredible leadership team. Their head of nutrition and physiology is Dr. Sonia Scheiss, who's a PhD in infant nutrition. So that business started with understanding the gut health, the gut microbiome insights we've been learning about for a few years now. For infants, if you get it right in 0 to 7, in the 0 to
Early.
7, 8, you set lifelong nutrition. That's a powerful insight. And so when you marry that up with the technology the team developed around 100% vegan, 100% plant-based, and 100% delicious cereals that you can mix with breast milk or formula or water, and yogurt snack melts. I'm kicking myself. I don't have some to put up on the screen, but we'll get it for you. You now have one of the fastest growing vegan baby food brands in North America. We've launched in Loblaws. We're in Costco in Southern California. We are online at Amazon. We are in select Whole Foods. We are in a number of the regional independents, and we're just getting started. The metrics that we have in terms of KPIs and performance, I can't go into great detail, but I'd be very disappointed if you didn't find Amara on a shelf near you within months, and certainly by the September timeframe. But we're also D2C. Here's the last piece I want to tell you that's powerful about infant nutrition. We didn't design, and the team did not design this brand for the high net worth super premium parent and made it out of reach for the mainstream. This is a product made for every family up and down the coast, across the country, and cross border. So these price points are at parity with legacy dairy and big processed food products, but they're good for your kids. And I tell you, we can't make enough. We can't make enough. We're so excited. So that's the EatWell Group platform today. We are already connecting the dots between our food tech. So Gino, I didn't tell you, used to have an assignment working on baby snacks. So Gino and Jessica can't wait to get started on the next pulse protein-based baby puff type snack, which she would kick me right now. I got so excited I started talking about it, but we will be busy for years to come solving nutrition needs, taste, great economics. And again, I would say from a pure investor lens, we have a tremendous roadmap because you're talking about an addressable market. I gave you a $90 billion quote for infant nutrition. That's dairy driven, it's processed food driven. But when you think about the generational impact we can make, the addressable market is anybody with a body. And I think the last bit for me, one of my kids is actually adopted from Haiti. I've got 3 bio kids and 1 adopted kid. This is very near and dear to my heart. So we have lots of opportunities to make a difference and do it in a way of building a great business.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. There is a lot of intel on infant nutrition and how a plant-based diet from birth better for children as they grow, and particularly for brain health. I've read studies on that, so it's very interesting. We at VegTech Invest agree as well. People stop thinking about plant-based as a burger. It is pet food. It is baby food. It's snacks. It's meal delivery services. It's frozen foods. The frozen food aisle is just expanding. I'm sure everyone knows that already, seeing it in their grocery stores. You know, it's up and down the supply chain. It's the innovation behind even cultivated meat and fermented proteins. It's not just that innovation right for the foods, but also all that machinery that you have to build to scale those products. And that supply chain doesn't even really exist in terms of the size of bioreactors you need, et cetera. So there's just so much to unpack here. And I love what you say about, you know, you've made, or Jessica has made, Amara baby food for everyone at a price, because it does come down to price, taste, and convenience. Who are we kidding? We maybe all remember what our mother said about vegetables, and everybody's heard from their doctor, cut out the red meat. But, you know, it's another thing to actually eat the stuff. So it does come down to taste, price, and convenience. But as we shift this global food supply system, it becomes a more democratic food supply system. Yeah. So you think, now who can afford filet mignon? Well, very few people. But now if you're doing cultivated meat, and that's not something that you guys are into right now, but, you know, as we do have these options and this innovation that comes down the pike, everybody can have filet mignon. So it's a very exciting time. And particularly when you talk about baby health, you want to see that all babies get what they need. And I'll sort of bookend that conversation by saying, and I want the same for farmers. So as we create, because you mentioned farmers, I didn't get to tell you, mention it before, but as we talk about shifting the entire global food supply system, farmers really were left out of that equation early on. And now that we're all looking to have this better relationship, better business deal, really, who are we kidding? That's what we're talking about. Farmers got, unless you're talking about the corporate farm, which, by the way, those aren't farmers. Those people have headquarters in New York. If you're talking about the actual small farmer, they've got it very tough. And I think shifting to what they grow and how they grow it, and maybe not even raising animals, but using that ranger land, let's say, to grow trees, which can pull carbon from the air. Again, this is all part of a bigger equation of planetary and personal health and animal health. Those farmers, they've always played an integral role, but now I'd like to see them get rewarded. So just lots of great stuff all the way around. Okay, we talked about the adoption curve. We tried to, at least. Both of you and I have a lot to say. Give me some time frames. You and I have drunk the Kool-Aid. We know that it's a secular trend. We know that it's going to happen fast. Help define that for people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what has changed when you start, and I back up my career to when I worked on big iconic brands like Quaker Oatmeal and Gatorade, and the model was really different with consumers. It was a model of few voices, loud budgets, and the information flow was not transparent. It wasn't anything to do with necessarily the control of the brands. It was really all about the information highway, right? And so I'm dating myself now, but when the world has gotten so incredibly open and transparent with its information, the world started to shift to smaller brands and newer brands and ideas, and it always became about the exchange of ideas. Okay, so that's a bit of a lesson in anthropology. What has opened up in information flows and social media and the like at a very simple level of consumer behavior, that's what drives adoption. Adoption is driven by the availability of information, and then the second is the opportunity to try something when it doesn't feel like it's so unusual. So what I've shared with people is when you look at I have kids that are in those teenage years, and they ask me about what was it like, what's a blockbuster? We've all heard that joke. They're stunned. They're stunned that there was something before streaming. They're like, how did you live before streaming? So technology shifted the curve. We live at a time when technology plus information are shifting together. So that's why I talk about food tech. That's why I talk about our investment in Sapentia, which is our food tech play, because we have new foods. I literally yesterday had an investor email me and say, I can't believe how delicious these are. My entire family loves them. And they probably wouldn't have known they were plant-based had he not told them. So there are these delicious new foods. You don't have to compromise. In fact, and you feel better when you've eaten them. So the food tech is there, the information is there. And what I would say is when you look at adoption curves in that way, adoption is here. It's here to stay now. I would tell you, Elysabeth, I'm sure you'd nod your head, even 3 years ago, vegan was not a good word. Today, it's a badge of honor. So something has shifted in the information, the food technology. And I will tell you this, I think that the medical understanding, the physiological understanding, you mentioned brain health. You're absolutely right. Simply the advances in brain and gut health. I would bet everybody in the audience today, myself and yourself included, has at least 2 or 3 people in the recent time frame who said, my doctor said I should probably try to bring some plant-based something into my diet. And particularly those who are in that kind of older time frame, they're amazed at how much better they feel. So, okay, this is the last lesson of anthropology. People stick to something when it works. So you've got technology, we've got incredible foods today, we've got information and transparency everywhere you want, and we've got something that works. I feel better when I'm watching out for inflammatory foods or dairy triggers that I might have, and I'm going to tell other people about it. And I have not made compromises because the food's delicious and the prices are coming down, the technology and the supply chain is maturing. I think the adoption curve is here now. I was running Amazing Grass, a plant-based supplement nutrition company that was born with wheatgrass. You remember wheatgrass?
I do.
15 years ago. We were still growing Amazing Grass, huge double digits the last couple of years I was there, because folks are starting to realize I feel better. I've heard about it, and it's actually, I can mix it in my smoothies and it tastes really, really good. Adoption is here now. The last bit I would add, and you and I should probably schedule more time, is what is happening at a policy level. The newest mayor of New York City,
Eric,
plant-based eating, not necessarily through environmentalism, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he needed to feel better and take care of his body, and the results are there. And so at a policy level, he's introducing that to students. So when you talk about adoption curve now in the younger ages, I think all of us, again, the parents or the aunts and uncles, we probably know more 8-year-old vegetarians than we ever thought we would. And it's a reality that's happening today. It's happening in New York. It's happening in LA. I'm in Southern California, Orange County. It's happening in school systems like Georgia. So we're understanding at a policy level that we're helping people take care of themselves. These are the reasons that the adoption curve for this is not going to be long and drawn out. It's not just the folks in the Pacific Northwest who are sort of a vegan from birth, but it's all of us who want to live healthier lifestyles. And that takes care of the planet, takes care of our pets, takes care of each other, and takes care of good business as well.
Yeah, that's why I'm always amazed when somebody says like, oh, this is a fad. And I just say, oh my gosh, there are so many reasons. We've talked about deforestation, wildlife diversity, our health, our healthcare costs, our pets and their healthcare costs, obviously food security, climate change. So much here. And not to mention dwindling resources. We haven't talked about this at all, but the inefficiency of animal agriculture in terms of use of land and water as we go from 7.7 billion people on the planet to 9.8 billion people on the planet by 2050, according to the UN, but you're not getting more land and you're not getting more water. So that mathematical equation soon doesn't work. It doesn't work now, really, when you look at it, but we're not affected in the West. You're only seeing this in other parts of the world. But, as we grow, that equation doesn't work. I would add to your sociological diatribe, if I may, that there's one thing you didn't add, which I think is so critical here, is that companies used to tell people what to eat. Nestle would just walk up and say, this is what you're getting and you should buy it. People now take charge of their health. That is also a badge of honor. COVID has expedited that. But even prior to COVID, people were tired of being told by big companies and or big government, this is what you should eat, milk, it does a body good, et cetera. And, 65% of Americans are lactose intolerant. That's much higher in African American communities and Asian American communities. So in fact, milk does not do a body good. And people feel agency now in a way they never did before about their own health. And I think that really spirals adoption because they're ready to put their money where their values are and their priorities for their health and kind of wear it loud and proud. So I agree. I say fast adoption. I'm going to put a number on it. I'm going to say that the next 3 years are going to be like the progress we did in the last 10 years. And that mainstream adoption is here within a decade. And in my lifetime, animal agriculture will be less than 25% of what we eat in my lifetime.
I want to agree with you on that ownership. We have a number of conversations and strategic alliances with folks on a global scale. This is everything you and I just talked about is happening on a global scale. Yes. Economies that you would imagine are very old world thinking are leapfrogging. Whether we have friends in the Middle East, friends in Europe, and friends even in South America, they are leapfrogging because they see everything you and I just spoke about. They understand the returns as investors, but they understand that they can take care of their populations. The last bit I would want to add that I would say very, very excited about is what's happening with integrative medicine, where you're actually finding a traditionally trained MD population who is going to nutrition first, health and wellness first. And it's part of that empowerment you speak of. I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on that folks are being empowered to say, let's not treat things in just a traditional name it, blame it, tame it way is one of my favorite says. I don't know if I could repeat his name, but it's about owning your nutrition and owning your health. And that empowerment, I think when you start hearing it from authority voices who've generationally had that voice, who have started to shift as well, it's a powerful time. It's a really fun time to be in the industry.
It's a really fun time to be in the industry. I'm excited to be here myself and excited for you as well. We talked about international adoption. And so I wonder about EatWell Group. You are in Canada. Obviously, you've got plays in North America. Are you elsewhere in the world or what's your global play?
We are in about 36 countries today through our Bell relationship. So we are with significant consumer products companies in the Southern Hemisphere. We are distributed in some of the Asian markets as well as some of the European markets. So we are global as a B2B ingredients provider. And as part of our thesis, because of the uniqueness of shelf-stable foods and snacks, so our consumer products side, there's global appeal. So there's multiple conversations underway to build that out this year and next year.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. Just underscoring what you were saying before, this is a global movement. This isn't something driven by the West Coast of the United States or something.
In some ways, we're behind, right?
100%.
There are When when
UK
when
being
when I
leading.
started studying in the UK, even in Germany, parts of Germany and Munich, I was
Right. Very much.
absolutely stunned by restaurants as you're walking around and learning the environment who are really offering and leading with their vegan items. It's really remarkable. So everybody's catching up very, very quickly. There's yet to be an international partner I've met who said this isn't a big idea and this is not for right now. And EatWell Group is beyond enthusiastic to go and drive big growth with that.
Yeah, so very exciting. Just a little while ago, I was hiking in Bhutan. And when I was hiking in Bhutan, you don't see many Americans. I did bump into one American. Don't see many people. And then I don't see many Americans. I bumped into one person. That person happened to be American. They were a top executive at Cargill Asia. And this was December of 2018. And he said, I used to have to spend months to try to get any investment for any new idea I had. Now, any investment I have that's around plant-based and sustainable gets funded right away. I don't even have to make a case for it. And we all believe that adoption is going to happen really quickly. We don't know when it's going to come, but that tipping point, that going from it wasn't here and now suddenly it's main stage for everybody, mainstream, is going to happen almost overnight. And we want to be ready upfront with our investment. We're getting out of ranching. We're getting out of beef. They were doubling down on chicken, but they really saw the global impact that plant-based was going to make, and hence that rationale of changing their name from a meat company to a protein company. So just to say that it's not just the two of us here, everybody, there are others as well. And in fact, the CEO of Cargill in June of 2021, paraphrasing his quote, that he predicted by 3 years, plant-based meat would cannibalize meat to the tune of 10%, and it would take over 10% of the entire meat market. And that's what you're going to see. That's what we're talking about, a shift of the global food supply system. It's not a yes and product, like, oh, I'll have meat and dairy and plants. No, what we're talking about here is the entire world shifting. Before we talk about the challenges, because it's not as easy as you and I say it is, obviously there's going to be bumps in the road. I do want to understand, you have the EatWell Group platform. Why didn't you guys go the traditional venture fund route? You have a unique composition.
I'll tell you, going to the public markets was really all about the fastest way to expose our story to as many people as possible. Like you and I have this incredible energy for it. We've seen the public markets have a tremendous amount of energy for it. And because our model leverages really decades of collective experience with our teams, we make bets on businesses that are economically sustainable. They're strong gross margin profiles, they're strong IP, they've got the moats, they've got the customer relationships, they're sold already at a Whole Foods or at a Costco, and they've been tried and tested. So there's not a business we've invested in that's not at a minimum 5 years old all the way to 4 decades old. That's really what we are all about, is growth and exposure to the widest markets available, because we want to make a very significant difference quickly. We're an ambitious group. We're grinding, we're working hard, and we try, I think, in some ways, reflect the ethos of the farmer while having the care and concern of anybody with an ESG profile. So that's really what it was about. There was a tremendous amount of momentum. There's a tremendous amount of capital, and we are very stringent in terms of fiscal discipline. We know how to drive these businesses, and we wanted to make big impact now.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. We say the same thing at VegTech Invest, that the bigger story, the bigger market, the bigger community that is interested, that needs these products, is the public market. So we wanted to go where the bigger community was. Okay, but it's not all roses and fairy tales. There are challenges to this secular trend we keep talking about. What do you see as bumps in the roads for either the sector as a whole or EatWell Group?
Sure. Well, we've certainly talked about that supply security and that assurance. So even beyond, I'll say, in their MD&A, quality, quantity, and cost of ingredients is their number one flashpoint. So that's a reality for the industry, and that's something we feel really proud of, having made our first investment in Bell, because we focused on that first. I think we also talked about the I think the tension that we live in this sector is demand is never a problem, and I don't want to take for granted our demand, but our demand is extremely strong. But we need at the policy level, we need things that reduce these barriers and these clogs in the supply chain. We joke over here, we're in Southern California. I see all those ships that make it into the news articles that everyone reads. And I'm tired of making the joke that I'm going to swim out myself into the ocean to grab our packaging, grab our raw materials off the containers. So I think this is as not necessarily an EatWell Group item. I'm sure there's head nodding going on. we need to make a very, very strong appeal to policymakers and those who help reduce the barriers to getting things unclogged. Thank you, Tom, and money's in the checks in the mail for that one. So we need that urgently, and I say that because if I could be bold, at the risk of sounding arrogant, we exist to make the planet's lives better. And we can do that through nutrition. And so there's no risk of demand, which creates economic benefit for our employees, our customers, our stakeholders, and so on all the way back through the farmer chain. We need a fix on that supply chain now. I would say the piece that has been a bit of a tension we've lived in that's starting to shift now is we continue to educate some of these end users, whether they're retail buyers, whether they're the strategic vendors or those who build the infrastructure and platforms. They're learning right now. So this one is my third one. They're learning right now that we're not talking to a small population that's vegan that live in the Pacific Northwest, which I love. We did Oregon as a family trip this past year. I love it. But what we're talking about is there is a significant uplift in what happens at retail when consumers say, I've found plant-based foods that make a difference for my family. They're delicious. And for those retail environments, those conversations are very, very exciting. So I would give you those three. I'm sure you're going to help me think through some more, but I will tell you this. I think what's incumbent on us who are driving the industry is to recognize the leaders at the Cargills, that there's a lot of 1 + 1 = 4. There's a lot of ways to create incremental growth so that we don't have to compete head to head. I think there's actually a lot more innovation, a lot more infrastructure, and a lot more growth for us, our companies, our employees, our stakeholders, to find the ways to work together. That's clearly happening. We know about it. It's Cargill, it's ADM, it's Tyson. They're all also investing in plant-based foods.
JBS.
Yes, absolutely. JBS, we have friends there. I would say this is a once in a lifetime, if not a once in a generation shift that we have.
It's mind-boggling, really, folks. That's what we're trying to say. The scale is enormous.
The scale is enormous. It's up to us to continue to demonstrate the fiscal discipline. It's up to us to demonstrate that we know how to drive the right kind of growth and not oversaturate. That's why you've heard our story. We focused on proteins and pulses close to the farm gate. By the way, I share on me, I didn't mention, it's a whole crop strategy. So it's the starch, the protein, the fiber. So we focused on the entirety of that piece. Our food tech is in snacking for our team. We're not on burgers because burgers are well taken care of today, and we're in baby food. So as EatWell Group does it, I would invite others to be selective and to be strategic about where we drive the right kind of growth. I believe we're going to be talking about plant-based foods in 10 years as if it just showed up, because it's still growing. The same way we talk about probiotics today, and those have been around for decades.
Yeah. Algae is going to find its new life. It's been around since the 70s. Yeah, totally. There's so much to riff on. If I were to say a challenge up and down the supply chain, I would say it's co-manufacturing, because these small businesses that are coming, these Davids in this David and Goliath competition, are so nimble. They're getting to market fast. They've got great innovation. They've got great products. They're working on taste and texture and cost and convenience. But, to stop what you're doing and run a manufacturing plant, talk about taking your eye off the ball. So they don't want to do that. And yet the manufacturing plants that exist now, first of all, there's not enough room. And there's also, not necessarily the know-how and the expertise. And then you do have to worry about IP. Sometimes people worry about IP disappearing when you share, quarters with people. So I think co-manufacturing, that is something that really needs to get fixed. And then I'll also say, you were saying, we're better together. I love my vegans on a street corner with a sign. I love them. They're one group. Then all those people we're talking about who are taking back their own health. So older people who are doing it for health, younger people, millennials who are doing it for the planet. And there's, their planetary health. They're taking a stand for their values, their health. They're great. I love them. You add those two groups of people together, you got a big group. Certainly the bigger group being the latter that I just mentioned. Is that enough? No. What really tips the scale here is that businesses, Cargill, JBS, Maple Leaf, Tyson, They know that they're running out of land and water. It's not like I discovered this. They know this as well. For their bottom line, if they're going to feed people in 20 years and not let that business, fall to the wayside, they're going to have to make a more efficient business equation for themselves. And so now when you add them to the mix, you have an unstoppable, unprecedented, rapid change of an entire supply chain. And when those businesses start to add, I'm talking about meat and dairy now, when they start adding more plant-based products, you're going to see them shift their advertising dollars to plant-based. And suddenly it's going to be super manly to eat that plant-based burger. And now you're seeing like just exponential growth that's unstoppable. So it is such an exciting time to be alive. I wish more people would get on the bandwagon. There is one more thing I wanted to add, but I wrote my notes and now I can't find it. So that will have to be that. Okay, I put some numbers to predictions. Do you want to do that for me? What are your predictions? What are we looking at? If you had to say like, roll the dice, come on, lucky 7, it's going to be 5 years, 7 years. When do you think you're going to see really mainstream adoption?
I think we're at, I will go with your 5-year, we're at mainstream adoption. And the key piece at this point is bringing online the infrastructure like you spoke about. This is more on the processing side. This is things like fractionation and the sort of clean processing of these pulses as an example. So they come to Bell can't make enough just because the demand is there. So the more of those that come online in the next 5 years, because the retail infrastructure already exists, the expertise from marketing and branding and sort of retail pricing models and go-to-market distribution, that's in place. That downstream component is in place. I think the other piece we'll see within the next 5 years, we'll be talking about the innovation in this space, the cultivated meats, the fermentation. We're going to be talking about that for a very, very long time. That's not going to be what drives adoption. That's what's going to keep people excited for the new foods to come. But what I see in the meantime is we're going to see the food tech that we have, for example, today for us with our extrusion platform. That's ready technology today. Now we have unique IP, but it takes modifications, but these are not wholesale. These are not bioreactors. That is all doable within the next 5 years. And the last bit I would suggest to you is, as we've seen some of these very, very big plays with the sovereign wealth funds, with the Guggenheims of the world, is we are going to see that capital move into rapid development of the infrastructure. Yes. It's 5 years. It's already taking root deep in parts of Europe. It's happening across the Middle East, the conversations that are available. It has happened in Asia for years. They're probably looking at us saying, what's the big deal?
What's the problem? What took you so long?
Our Canadians have been forerunners, and our friends at the Saskatchewan Food Centers have been the ones who've innovating these products. So it's 5 years. And I think what I'm most excited about is how we can share the new foods we get to invent at EatWell Group and bring them and share them with you.
Yeah, it's so very excited. And my takeaway from what you've said is, folks, this is not the first time that this has happened. Governments are always the last to get on board. So don't be waiting for them, because you'll be waiting a really long time. It's the capital markets, it's business that is going to solve our greatest, most pressing problems on the planet. And we're going to do that together really quickly. So it's a very exciting story. As we close here, let me ask you a couple, I'll call them personal questions, but they're really kind of rapid fire, just off the top of your head, off the cuff. Give me your answer. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Oh man, how would I answer that rapid fire? I wish I knew how strong the technology, the food tech was going to be to create these new foods, because 10 years ago I worked on products that just now landed that were organic in certain big chains like Whole Foods, that 10 years ago they were not good. They were not good enough. They didn't taste good, they didn't look good, and they didn't cost right. So I wish I knew 10 years ago how amazing the clean technology is that we're going to have.
Yeah, that's awesome. We call that VegTech over here. Yeah. Okay, so when you're having a bad day, you're running around, things aren't going as you would like, what's the phrase you tell yourself to get yourself back in the game?
We got this. We got this.
Yeah.
You know, we got this. I think it is very easy, especially this industry can feel like an anti-gravity roller coaster.
Yes, I know.
It's one thing when you're trying to fix problems. It's another when you're faced with amazing opportunity, and that's what we have. EatWell Group has amazing opportunity. I think those days with the anti-gravity roller coaster, when you hear about another container and another ship stranded somewhere, and I think it's always we got this. I think that is one of the most wonderful things about the people we've met in this space, the forerunners that we are in the space, the investors, have an incredible purpose-driven life kind of mantra that keeps them going, because we are doing, this is the friendliest and hardest working sector I've ever been involved in. And I would tell you, so what I tell myself is, we got this. And most times I'm saying a prayer at the same time.
My gosh, most times I'm saying we got this, and I think I'll get to sleep in like 2030. Like there's so much to do, there's so much opportunity. I am up all the time at all hours of the night. My last question for you, you're running around, you're super busy. Like we talked about, you don't have time for lunch. What's your go-to snack?
Oh, my go-to snack, absolutely. The truth is, I eat the baby snacks at Amara. I have to, I'm not a baby. I'm not in my infant nutrition days, but those melts are absolutely scrumptious. And I have to lie, because Gino's looking at me saying, Mark, what about my plant-based Cheetos? And those are the second. So those are true. I absolutely love those products because they're delicious. They're good for me. They support our teams, and I feel good when I eat them.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, I'll take the plant-based Cheetos and the baby supplies, actually. So you can send me something, because here's our last thing that we have in common. I split my time between Chicago and LA. So I'm in Venice, not too far from you. So I'll get my hands on some of those. Once the container ships come in, I'll get my hands on some of those plant-based Cheetos. I want to say, Mark, don't go away. Everybody else at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, thanks for being with us today. Wasn't Mark just fantastic? A great, huge knowledge drop for all of us. Mark, thanks for being with me. You don't go away. Everybody else, I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.